This video will show you how to create a rundown if you're producing for Florida Focus. So we have a template of our rundown that you can find inside of the templates folder right here. Just make sure to open it in Excel Online. Usually you'll already have a rundown that's been created for you, but if you don't, you could copy this in Excel Online, create a new rundown by clicking New, Excel Spreadsheet. I've already gone ahead and done that here, and I've named it Month, Day, Year. And I just put rundown example so that people understand this is not a real rundown. And when I go ahead and open it, it's important to always open in Excel Online, otherwise you won't be able to edit. Just as a reminder, you have to use online version of Microsoft Excel in the same way that you have to use the online version of Word, because otherwise it won't be a working document that other people can actually use in real time. So I'm going to go ahead and open that right here. I have the same one here. And I'm just going to paste that template in. And your template might be different depending on what day you're producing, but this is a basic overview. If you paste it and notice that some of your columns are weird, just go ahead and adjust them this way. Usually your slug needs to be quite a bit longer. The estimated time may need to be stretched out a little bit. And so you can adjust these depending on, if somebody's name is a little bit longer or whatever you need. So you'll notice that there are several columns here that explain who is doing what. So this is the responsibility of the producer to fill out so that everybody communicates and understands what the expectations are. The first thing that you're going to do is I would recommend writing some notes down here if you have an idea of, let's say, a package that a reporter has been working on all week. So usually by the time you get started on your rundown, you should already know that you have at least one package from a reporter. So I might write, like for example, Hillsborough vaccine crash or something, because the website crashed today for the vaccine rollout, and that's going to be like a package, and let's say Carla is the reporter on this one. So I already know I have a package from Carla, and then I'm going to have DeSantis COVID regulations or something. And that's going to maybe be a VO or whatever from Bob. And then whenever I know like who's doing what, because a lot of these can be pitched ahead of time, I'm just going to start writing them down here, because you don't want to necessarily stack your show until you know what's the lead story. And it's really helpful to know all of the stories before you start putting them in. You can totally start building your rundown even if you don't have all your stories, but then just expect to have to rearrange some things. And that does happen in the real world too, where you'll stack a rundown and have to move things around basically all the time. So that's normal, but it does help to kind of have an idea of what stories you have. So I'm just going to give you like some fake ones. For example, if I'm going to do a story on USF, go like remote learning or something, and that's going to be, maybe that's going to be my newsroom package. And I have an anchor, let's say that's Ashley is going to anchor, but my writer who pitched the story, let's say Dylan, pitch the story. And I'm just writing little notes down here for myself so that when I stack the rundown, I kind of know what I'm doing. And then let's say we have a kicker about, let's say a baker who is like giving away free donuts or something, for the first responders or whatever. And that maybe that's a SOTVO. And so that's going to be, let's say, Tim. Tim's going to write it. And then I'll put in everybody else. So if this was my rundown, I have about 4 stories. That's pretty normal. You might have 3 stories one day. You might have 5 stories one day. But let's pretend like right now we have 4 stories. I'm going to lead with this package, and Carla's, for example, going to be out in the field. And so in this instance, I'm going to start my show with my anchor for the day. And let's say that's Jen. So Jen is going to be my anchor today. Jen will toss to Carla's package. And in this instance, we don't have a split or anything. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste this. But if you notice that there's like a background here, you can highlight this and then, highlight this and then change this to no fill. And I'm just going to copy and paste. I copy and paste a lot, not because it's a ton of time in Florida Focus, but because as a producer, when I was creating 1 hour or 5 hour long shows, I never had time to type words, and I just got into the habit of like copying and pasting everything. So it's a good habit to get into. You also reduce the chance of having typos in that instance. So copying and pasting is the best way to go. So let's say Jen is going to be tossing to the package. My first story slug is going to be this one right here. It's going to be about Hillsborough County's vaccine website that crashed. So I'm just going to paste it here, and I noticed that it looks like the font color was like a little lighter. So I'm just going to change it to automatic so that it's black. If ever you're moving things around and you're like, oh, where did my little chart or lines go? You can just highlight this and then add your borders back in. I think it's helpful to read, but it also does match kind of the way ENPS or iNews looks. So in this instance, let's say we have Jen. Jen's gonna say hello in the studio. We could do a mid-studio hello, and then we can go to Jen with an OTSL, tossing to Carla's package. So let's say in this instance, Carla's the reporter, and so Carla's going to be the writer, and Carla's also going to edit her own video. And let's say, because it's the lead story, we can go ahead and give Carla a 15-second toss and 30 seconds for the package. That's fine. We want to make sure Carla knows this information, but if she's done all of our work ahead of time, it's something that you can communicate with. So by the day you actually start your news of the day shift, you should kind of already know what this time is, which is really great. And you can also have your anchor read the toss ahead of time if you want, but usually the toss is pretty short, so it won't make a huge difference if your anchor is a second or so over or under. The next thing here, so now we have our first story is going to be the next story. Let's say I'm going to do a breakout, after the Hillsborough County vaccine crash, I'm going to give you a breakout story about what DeSantis just said about COVID regulations. So that's going to be here in place of my second story slug. So I'm going to write DeSantis COVID regulations. And in this instance, I had it in as a SOTVO for my template, but it's just going to be a VO. So I'm just going to delete this. The template is here to help make it easier so you don't have to write everything from scratch. And when you have like a short show, it may not seem like you're saving a ton of time, but when you start producing really long shows, the templates are going to save you time, even if you have to go in and adjust the templates. I definitely recommend working in templates for everything you do. I've seen producers, and when I first started, I started producing all my shows from scratch every day. And I was like, oh my God, it's wasting so much time. So use little templates like this, even if you have to change it. So Jen is going to be our anchor again. Jen is going to read with an OTS, and then it's a VO, and the VO is going to have a lower third. Let's keep it at a 20-second VO for now. We may change it, but for now, let's say the VO gets a total of 27 seconds. 7 seconds or so when Jen's on camera for the OTS, and then about 20 seconds for the VO. And in this instance, we have Bob, who is our writer. And so all of this information you're going to be able to find on our calendar. So you want to make sure to always check the calendar, and you'll know, who's scheduled for what role. So Bob is the writer, and perhaps this day we had scheduled Zach maybe. Zach's going to be the video editor for this. So in this instance, I'm putting Zach here because this is the line that the video is on. So Zach is already assigned to edit whatever video Bob writes to. So this is the line. I wouldn't put Zach's name on this line because there's no video on this line, right? The only time I would put the video editor's name on this line is, let's say, for example, we have a video in the OTS. That is pretty common. You'll see that in lots of TV stations. If the video is really dramatic or really special or specific to what you're trying to tell, there are instances where you would want the video in the OTS, and maybe it's a VOTS and then the video goes full. That's also an option. But in this instance, let's just pretend it's a standard OTS, which is just a graphic. And in that case, Zach's name would not be on this line because this line is just for the OTS graphic. So then let's say the next story here is going to be a newsroom package. So USF remote learning, let's just put that one right here. And in this case, Jen is going to toss, but we have Ashley in as our anchor here. So Ashley is anchoring because the newsroom packages are really basically anchor packages. They're done up against a green screen. They're read off a teleprompter. These are also fairly standard in TV news. So you'll have a reporter. In this case, Carla is the reporter in the field, but I also have Ashley who is recording a package that a writer or a producer will write. So as a producer, I would write newsroom packages for reporters sometimes, or sometimes they were for anchors. But really, I as the producer would write the whole package, and I would just tell one of the on-air talent, I need you to read this and we're going to record it. And then somebody would edit it like a quick package afterwards. So this is a pretty standard type of package. It's very different than this package, which is a package that is written and produced in the field by a reporter. So the whole process of editing this with B-roll and all this stuff with Carla's voiceover, that's very different than this package, which is basically like a look live package because Ashley would be reading the script off the teleprompter. And then if we had B-roll, if we had a soundbite, we would just edit that right on top. Ashley would not be voicing over anything. She wouldn't record her voice separately and add that separately. It would just be like a look live reporter or anchor read where Ashley would stand there and read the teleprompter from the very beginning to the very end. If there's an area where we thought we had a SOT, for example, we could put a little note in the teleprompter that says pause for SOT. And then Ashley would pause for a second, and then we would just edit that SOT in post. So these are two distinctly different types of packages that are helpful for producers to understand that they have as a tool of storytelling. It really helps with the pacing that one anchor isn't reading everything themselves. But for the purposes of our class, it's great because then people get lots of extra experience. So somebody like Ashley would be able to anchor this and have that for her reel, even if she wasn't the main anchor of that show this day. So lots of reasons why you would do a newsroom package. But in a newsroom package, keep in mind the anchor who's anchoring that newsroom package isn't necessarily writing it. And so in this case, let's pretend that Dylan had actually pitched the story in the morning. Dylan pitched USF remote learning and as maybe a SOTVO or a VO that morning, and perhaps the producer's like, you know what, I want this to be my newsroom package. Dylan would still write it. And the only difference is that we would write it as a package, and it could be just as short. It could be 20 seconds long. It could just be a reader even. It could just be Ashley on camera if we have to, but it's always better to add elements like VOs, if possible, even a SOT. But keep in mind that the way that this package is created is different than the way this package is created, especially because we have a reporter assigned for this. The reporter would have done this days ahead of time. So this package should be canned or should already be ready to go, whereas this one would be your anchor reading it, just like a look live to tape read that day. And so you could still get a news of the day package, but it would be a much faster production workflow. So this is way faster to create than this, which is a more traditional package where you go out in the field, you do an interview, you shoot B-roll, you record your voice, you shoot a stand-up. This takes a lot more time. It also looks better, looks like it takes a lot more time, but this is definitely a standard type of package. It's important for people to understand how to create. So in this instance, I'd put Dylan's name here and here, because Dylan would be writing the toss and the package, and I should have done that here as well, my bad. So Carla would also be writing the lead-in and the package. And in theory, Carla would also write, whatever the script is for the stinger, but the producer usually goes in and maybe changes that part a little bit, but Carla should definitely write it as though it's going to air exactly the way that she writes it. The main reason that the producer would be changing the toss is because perhaps something brand new just came out way after the reporter created the package that we could weave in as a new next element in the stinger going into the package. So in this case, we're going back to this here, USF Remote Learning Package. It's a newsroom package. And so I'm going to put control room here because this is an example of, let's say, Ashley in front of a control room. She could be in front of a different type of virtual background, but in this instance, since it's a newsroom package, we'll just go ahead and put them in front of the control room. And then let's say we had a different student assigned to be a video editor that day. Let's say Janelle is going to edit this package. So Janelle is going to be the video editor here on that day. So the last stories are kicker. Tim pitched a kicker about a baker that gives free donuts to the nurses or something. So baker, free donuts, and that's going to be a SOTVO. And I'm just going to copy and paste that here. And in this instance, I'd add a SOT before this VO, and it would still be 2 lines just like this. And then I would add Tim's name as the writer here. Tim is the writer here. And then let's say we had a different video editor that day, or perhaps Tim was scheduled to edit his own video. That may change depending on the day. So let's say in this instance, Tim was assigned to do both so that he could get the hours he needed for that week. So Tim is editing the video, which is just the SOTVO here. Remember, there's no video in this column. And this is basically our rundown. Oops, this is basically our rundown now. It's stacked. So we've stacked the rundown. We've put the stories in order of both importance, but also emotion. So you can tell, like, if this is about, poor old people who can't go online to make their appointment to get the vaccine, that's concerning, that's frustrating. It's a little harder news. This is also harder news, but we maybe chose to lead with this story because it was a package and you want a big presence at the top of your show. And then the USF remote learning, it's hard enough, but it's probably lighter than these stories. And then we kind of go from hard to light. The kickers go at the end. So when you're thinking about what am I going to do, like what order of stories I'm going to do, usually it's something you have to balance, but generally importance and seriousness and emotion should really help make that decision on what goes first. I'm also looking at pacing. So I'm looking at what Jen is doing here. Jen, my anchor, shouldn't be reading nonstop without breathing. I don't want Jen to lose breath, but also I want it to look like we have a huge cohesive production team. So I want another reporter's face here and then a different reporter's face here. And I like that balance. So it's not just a ton of VOs in one row, or it's not only packages that helps with the pacing. So that's something else a producer has to do. I want a good pacing. If a producer stacked a show that was just VOs and no sound bites, for example, the pacing would feel off. It wouldn't feel, as well produced as it could have been. So here is our rundown. The next step for your producer is to now look at who's scheduled to be the OTS editor. Are there any full screens? In this instance, we don't have any full screens, but you'd go back to the Google Calendar and fill this in. So let's say Matt is going to be our OTS editor for the day. Maybe we have 2 graphics editors. So let's say, Matt, I'm going to need you to create a stinger for the lead story, and I also want a matching OTS. So if somebody's making a stinger for this story, I also want them to be the person to make the OTS. This doesn't have to have an OTS. You could have, for example, left Jen on a studio mid shot or on a different shot. But if you do decide to have an OTS here, which is pretty common for the lead story, I want these to match. So you don't want to assign 2 different graphics editors for the stinger because you want the stinger and the OTS to match. And oftentimes it's a screen grab of the stinger that makes it to be the OTS so that it looks like a cohesive branded story. So let's say Matt is the OTS editor there. And then let's say, I don't want this many OTSs in a row. I don't necessarily want to do an OTS for this. I could choose to go back to the mid shot here. That'll also give it, a little visual pacing. In this instance, maybe I had a different graphic editor. Kaylee, let's put Kaylee in to edit the OTS here. And then I would also maybe put like a Kaylee to edit this one. And then I just realized too, I had put Matt in for the OTS there, but really it's a stinger, and a stinger is video. So I'm going to put Matt here. So if I put Matt here and Matt's like, well, I'm not assigned to be a video editor today, I'm assigned to be a graphics editor, then Matt can look over and see like, what is this column here? Oh, it's a stinger. So I'm editing a stinger. So everybody here should be able to look at this rundown and know exactly what they're assigned to do. So Matt should look at this and say, oh, I'm editing the stinger and I'm also making a matching OTS. And the story I'm doing is the Hillsborough vaccine crash. And then Kaylee would know, okay, I'm editing 2 OTSs. I'm making an OTS for this story and I'm also making an OTS for this story, for example. So this would be the main rundown for the show. I'm going to hide the actual time column and do a quick screen grab. I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to do Command-Shift-4. And I'm just going to go ahead and maybe do this since I don't have any full screen editors. And then this is going to be my little rundown, and I'm going to post this inside of Facebook whenever the rundown is done. And I'm going to say, okay, this is our rundown for the day. Just a reminder, Carla, your package is already done. We're good for you, but Matt, I need you to do a stinger. And we've decided that the text for the stinger is website crashes. And we want visuals in the background that show vaccines. And so you want to tell your stinger editors exactly what you want them to do. The stinger editors or the OTS editors should not just look at the slug and then copy that, because the slugs are not always like the most powerful words, or maybe don't even match really what the stinger should be. And so as the producer, you need to make that call pretty early on. Is the first sentence that Jen is going to be reading, is that going to talk about the website crash? Is that what you want it to actually be? And so make that call before you post on Facebook so that you can tell Matt, what they're doing. And then for the next note, you would just say, okay, Carla, you're good to go. We've already approved your package. It's in. Bob, I'm going to need you to finish writing, whatever. And then you just basically tag each person in the Facebook post and just very, very quickly remind them of what they need to do. And then everybody can basically start with the news of the day production. And then as you come in throughout the day, perhaps Ashley has recorded her USF remote learning script and told you, my package is actually a little long. I'm reading it at about 35 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste it here. And I'm going to just put 35. If this happens to you, it's just an Excel thing, and I'll show you how to fix it. Basically just delete it. And I'm going to fill out some of the other things, and then I'll show you how to add that sum. The show time is 2:30. So you need the show to be exactly 2:30. Had I put, some weird numbers in here, let's say I wanted the SOTVO to be 25, then you'll notice I'm 5 seconds heavy, or I'm 5 seconds over. So you always want to make sure that this is as close to 2:30 as possible. You might, when you're stacking it, think you're a little heavy, and in your mind, okay, well, I could cut something here or whatever, have something ready to go in your head that you could cut. And then as you go throughout the day, this package, you should always kind of know exactly how long that is. And in this instance, let's say the reporter made it exactly 30, which is great. You'll have all of these times, package times will be in way ahead of time. But as you get closer to the actual time of the show, you'll reach out to your anchor. Once all of the scripts are approved and everything is in, the anchor will go ahead and read all of the scripts out loud. It's really important that they're read out loud so you get a consistent time. And so let's pretend that Jen read this toss, and now all of a sudden, the toss is really heavy. It's 27 seconds long. Or something, and then this was right on time. Oops, my bad. This one was right on time, and let's say this one was 5 seconds heavy with the package, but the toss was 7. And then let's say we ended up getting 25 seconds for the story as well. Your goodbye and your close is usually gonna be 5 seconds for each. Don't forget to grab the show open and the hello. Those are also usually pretty consistent. So the top and the bottom might be the same. So now to kind of see, well, how long is this actual time? How long is the real show? Double click inside of this total column here, then go over here to this little field, click on this FX button, and it's just the sum. You hit OK, and then click in this box here, drag, so you click and hold, drag, and then don't let go until you've highlighted all of them, and then let go. And this is basically taking the sum of H2 to H14, and then you could make a little close bracket and hit enter. And now look, your show is 22 seconds heavy. So then you go, oh gosh, what do we do? It's way heavy. What can we do here? Do I have to kill a story? That's, if you have a story that maybe isn't working out as well as you thought it was going to work out, maybe Tim's story has to get killed. You could, in theory, kill this entire story, and that would save you all the time you need. Or you could shorten the stories. So let's say, Tim got this SOTVO, but the soundbite wasn't really that good of quality. Maybe you change it to a VO. And if it's a VO, it's going to be a little shorter. So let's say, it's just going to be a quick VO. It's going to be a 15-second VO instead. Then you would just update that in the rundown, and now you have 12 seconds to kill. And so that's the basic thing that the producer will do is how can I kill time, or how can I add time? Let's say something happened and one of your other stories fell through and you're saying, oh no, I need to fill time. What do I do? A really easy thing to do to fill time is to add an anchor tag. So in this instance, I could right click and I could insert a row and I could add an anchor tag. So this story here could have a breakout. And so I would always want to change my page numbers, and I can go back and do that at the very end. And this is going to be a tag. Maybe it's going to be a one shot. It's going to be a one shot. Jen's going to read a one shot on Studio Mid. And then I go, oh, wait a second. I don't want, if this is a one shot too, I don't want to go one shot to one shot back to back, because Jen's reading about this story and then all of a sudden she's going to be reading about this story, and that might be a weird transition. I could insert another row and do Hillsborough vaccine crash here and add a full screen graphic. And so Jen could read, for example, if you want to learn more information about where you can get a vaccine and then take full screen, go to hillsboroughcounty.org, blah, blah, blah. And this could be a full screen graphic that has a website that would give people more information. And it could be up for 5 seconds. It doesn't have to be super long. And then you would add all of that time. So you could always grab one of these little guys. Don't just write like 5 seconds, because that's not gonna do anything for you here. You have to always write it in the actual time. So I recommend click, copy, and paste. And then here you could just make 5 seconds out of that. Maybe the on-camera tag is 5 seconds, and then that full screen is 5 seconds. Perhaps they're 2 really short sentences. And that's a way that you could add 10 seconds to your show really easily. But then you have to have somebody make this full screen graphic. Or perhaps you could do a screen grab of a website or something like that. So there's lots of things that you could do as a producer to add or kill time. If you were using ENPS and a content management system, after you froze these pages, it would be like 5.1 or 5A, or you call it something else, because everybody would have had rundown and scripts printed with their page numbers. But in this instance, we would just go ahead, if it's early enough in the day, and just change all of these page numbers to be correct. And the reason we use page numbers is because when you communicate to people, it's a lot easier to say, hey, I'm adding a tag and a full screen graphic, page number 6, or I'm adding page number 6 or 7, or let's say the Baker story, ended up not being that good. The producer could just say, hey, I'm killing page 12 and 13. And that's all you would need to tell people for everybody to understand, okay, this story is now dead, or this story we're not working on this one anymore. And it's not a huge deal for Florida Focus, but when you go to work at an actual TV station, it is going to be a big deal to be able to communicate in page numbers. Because if I'm an anchor and I'm reading the teleprompter and my producer needs to tell me that the next story is dead, if they tell me page 9 is dead, that's a lot easier for them to be like, hey, I know you're reading a teleprompter and talking at the same time, but just so you know, DeSantis COVID regulations is dead. Like, that's awful. Don't do that to people. You cannot communicate in full sentences in TV news during a live show. It will just throw everyone off. So page numbers is good, just to get used to communicating in page numbers. But anyways, this is how you do this rundown. The next thing I was going to show you, let's say Bob, let's say Bob is writing the story about the DeSantis COVID regulations. And Bob's like, I only have file footage of DeSantis. I don't really have anything compelling. I mean, I could just wallpaper this VO, but I think maybe a full screen graphic would be better for the story. And then you say, okay, I'm not going to have a VO. Maybe is it a multi-bulleted full screen? Maybe it's a full screen reveal. So perhaps an FS3. So let's say Bob now is going to write to an FS3, which is 3 full screen graphics. Still, right, these are JPEGs or PNGs that are edited to look like a revealing full screen. You would just put FS3. And it's important for everybody to know, is it an FS like this? If it's just a regular FS, that means it's one image. It's one JPEG or one PNG. It's one full screen. Like in this instance, this is one full screen that just says, go to this website. That's all the information that you're going to get, because it's just a super quick 5-second tag. But in this instance, it's the whole story. It's a 20-second story. I don't want one full screen graphic. So if Bob says, hey, I'm not finding any compelling video, can I just make a full screen graphic? You as the producer should say, how about you make an FS3, or how about you make an FS4, depending on how much content they have in the script. Because an FS3, revealing 3 times during the 20-second story is much more compelling for the audience than having one full screen graphic up for the full 20 seconds. That's going to be pretty boring for them. So you would write FS3 if there are 3 reveals or 3 bullet points, or FS4, if there's 4, usually it's about 3 or 4. Sometimes it's 2. You could do 5 if there's a reason to do 5, but usually, 3 or 4 is approximately what you would do. And that's all you would have to do here. But then you'd want to tell Zach, not only do you want to communicate in this in the rundown, that now he's editing a full screen, not a video, you would also want to go on Facebook and say, hey, heads up, Zach, the page 9, or DeSantis COVID regulations is now going to be FS4, not a VO. So hopefully this made sense. We will be working together a lot on rundowns. It's important. It's really, really important that people understand how to use rundowns, how to read rundowns. The last thing I'll say, depending on what your open is, you could change, like what we saw in the last video, you could change it to a SOTVO open or a package open. So for example, if I wanted my anchor Jen to pre-produce an open where maybe it was a SOTVO, and I wanted Jen to just re-record it ahead of time, we could do that. So then it would be a package, or it could just be a SOTVO or a SOTVO. There's lots of things you can do to create unique shows that bosses, hiring managers are looking at to see, do you have creativity? And I think it's important for you all to save your rundowns. So make sure, if you're on a PC, you could use the snipping tool, which is usually down here. There's like a search thing, and you just search snipping, for example, or print screen. Save all of these. You could also, save or print, and then export them that way. But I would encourage you to copy this and put it onto your website portfolios, so that you can show, look what I did. Because just looking at this, a hiring manager will understand what you're doing. They'll be able to look and say, oh, you can speak in this language. Like you can use these little acronyms, and you understand how to produce TV news. And this, for example, like having a story, especially your lead story, with this many elements is also a good sign. That will show a hiring manager that you are trying, that you're putting effort into adding breakout elements or pre-producing something special at the open. There's all sorts of things that you could do inside of the rundown to make the show flow, to make it really stand out. So definitely get into the habit of saving all of these, posting them on your websites, and you could post them on LinkedIn, on social media, and say, here's the rundown I created today. Here's our show. And if you have any issues with this, you can always ask me, but I really recommend that you go back through our rundown. So if you go into the rundown folder, you'll see, there's so many rundowns here. And if you go to the YouTube channel, just watch them. So YouTube, Florida Focus, and just go and take a look at all of these things, because you'll notice there's like so many newscasts. And so if you click on any of these, you'll see, the date, and that will correspond with the rundown. So watch them side by side and understand what you're seeing, and ask me any questions. Thank you very much. And I hope that you love producing as much as I do.